So, what it's like to be a 25-year-old who went through COVID, kind of thought he was going to do some business stuff, and then has found himself in manufacturing in a real a CNC machinist job at a real company that's producing stuff every day. First of all, where are you born? Where did you grow up? Kind of what was your setting?
So I was born in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, home of Yingling, the oldest bear in America. That's what most people know it. I was actually moved out to Washington State a couple weeks after I was born. My mom was in the military. She was stationed at Fort Lewis. So for about the first 11, 12 years of my life, I grew up in Washington State, and that was a neat experience. And over time, my mom decided she wanted to come back to Pennsylvania to be with her family. So I think I was about 12 years old when I moved back to PA. And I was a city boy, so I was, skinny jeans, skateboarding, and I moved to the middle of the country. And that was a big difference. It was neat to learn both aspects, see the city and the country. So I'm definitely happy I got to experience both of those. But after high school, I ended up going to college for business. Went to Bloomsburg University for about a year and a half, and then I think it was fall of or the spring of 2019, right when COVID hit. I decided I was going to take a gap year, kind of because of grades, kind of because of I wasn't doing much learning at school. I was doing a bit more partying, but
I'm still in my gap year. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
yeah. So I took the gap year, and I always worked. I worked while I was in college. I worked while I was in high school, so I knew I would be able to find something to keep me busy. And I bounced around a couple places. I worked at a hot tub factory. That was really interesting. I got to refurbish hot tubs that had problems. They would get sent back, and I would diagnose what was wrong. And I was driving about an hour to work there, so I was a little bit not digging the commute. So I found MI Windows and Doors, which was the local factory that everybody worked at from my high school. And some of that was like, oh, I'm gonna be the guy that goes to MI. You know what I mean? And I put in an application. I ended up in the shipping and receiving department, and I got a little bit more opportunity there. I had a bit of a lead position. They would have me in charge of receiving whatever trucks were coming that day, and then also kind of coordinating some of the bigger ideas as far as what was happening, just making sure everything was in place. But they also gave me first aid training. I got to do a Kaizen. That was really, really fun and insightful as far as we brought all the departments together to hypothesize this big purchase that they were making for an automated line. And they just gave us the freedom to say, hey, we're going to maybe redesign this entire second building. What do you guys think we should, design it around? And
Is
that
that
was
something
cool.
they did normally? Like, is that part of their like whole company culture?
As far as usually it would have been the boss, but I think he had a lot on his plate, so I was the guy that they picked. But it's usually like the elected sort of leaders in the department, and I just ended up getting lucky, and they were like, "Yeah, sure, send Cameron. He's crazy."
What was your experience of like set that Kaizen sort of summit planning commission up a little bit? Like they're opening like another building to for construction, like, and so they were just like, how is this going to affect the whole line entirely? Like, what was that experience like?
They had an automated process already, but they were ramping up production because they were partnered with Window World, and like they were getting so many orders that they couldn't keep up with it. And they were like, okay, we're buying double the equipment we have now, and we're just going to fit it in here. And we want to make sure the flow is going to be, if we could change anything to get that flow a little bit better, that's what their objective was. So I think there was like three or four, like $500,000 machines or something big that was coming in a couple quarters. And it was really neat to be able to see like different people in the hierarchy of the facility all blend together, because I was, probably the least executive person there, but you'd have guys who were, managers, all sorts of people that were sort of participating. They definitely brought more people from the department that was going to be affected. So that was more the people I was on equal playing field with. But then they had like, the process, the continuous improvement coordinator, like the head manager of both facilities. So they already had this second warehouse like already created, and it was up and running. They were just getting ready to gear it up and double production kind of thing.
The efficiency they wanted, or when those machines came in, were there some surprises?
I actually left before that happened. I
Okay.
I was living with my grandparents at the time, and I ended up, like, not having that house situation, so I needed to find somewhere that I could live on my own, and I had a girlfriend in Williamsport, Pennsylvania at the time, so I was like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna get an apartment up there, and then, we can have our own place together, it'll be awesome." So, I sorta just went for it. I found somebody that said that they were gonna let me live. I paid my security deposit, got myself an apartment, and then I was like, "Where can I go to find some work?" So, I went to the temp agency. I ended up at, I'm not even gonna call them out, just manufacturing facility that everybody at the temp agency goes to, and it was pretty wild. I was like, "This is not the place for me."
Were you making stuff? Were you doing like shipping and receiving? Like what kind of company, like, style wise of a
I
company is
ended
it?
up in the, shipping and receiving department, and it was a lot of, like, we were prepping for the guys who loaded the trucks, but there was probably like 4 times as many workers that I think was needed. So there was a lot of standing around, and with extra time, guys just, filled it with doing some silly activities, and I was like, "This isn't challenging me. This isn't gonna give me any room to grow." Like, I coulda sat there and just collected my paycheck, but I didn't want that, so I went back to the temp agency and I was like, "Hey, do you guys have anything like first shift? Is there any opportunity for me, like, to possibly find something that will push me kind of thing?" And they told me about the place that I really really found my stick at was PMF manufacturing, and that's where I ended up in sort of the machining role that I got to. But at first, they have like a laser cutter and a press department, and then like a flow forming department. So I started at the laser cutter, which was just cutting big circles out of sheet metal, real thick sheet metal, but you pick the circles up and stack them up for the guys, and that was pretty simple. And then I ended up going to the press department, which was like hot, oily, and it was loud, and definitely a unique. If you stick it out there, I commend you because it is not easy, and it is not like for the faint of heart by any means. But I did that for a while, but I did it all with a lot of passion and integrity. So I don't know if they sort of saw how much I cared and how hard I worked, but eventually they kept moving me around to different machines, and I ended up. They always talked about the machine shop like there was this, like there was a light shining from that end of the hallway. Like I could see the glow from the machine shop, and I was like, wow, that's where I want to go. You know what I mean? And I don't know where or how, but I eventually they needed a guy to help. Somebody wasn't there that day, so they needed somebody to come over and just run a manual drill that cut a notch out of a piece of metal. It was just the tiniest little notch, and you'd put a pin in it and make sure that you didn't wear your drill out. And that was how I started. I remember, and they
And
told me,
this was
hey,
just I should ask earlier, but this is just like a kind of a job shop, general purpose machine shop. They had a bunch of clients building different parts.
I would say like a medium-sized job shop because they have some like Department of Defense. Like they do some pretty high-end stuff, but they aren't like very big. They're definitely like medium-sized job shop.
But what's a machine shop like for somebody who had no experience with it before? Like, what was your first impression?
I really commend this facility that I went to because they set me down and like they from the get told you like, hey, this is gonna be like they set requirements. Like, I mean, I remember one that I thought was silly was like, "You're supposed to be clean when you come here." Like, they want you to show up and be, like, ready to work, ready to be honest. Like, they were setting values, and they did a lot of the stuff that I felt like got brushed over at other companies. Like, you had to sit, and it was almost like an orientation. You were watching videos and learning about what they were expecting of you before you actually got to the shop floor. So I think my first week I spent just kind of getting a little bit of my toes in the water, didn't really know what was gonna happen, but to have them immediately say like, "Hey, we're already gonna hold you to this standard, and you're not," you know what I mean? They separated you from that aspect, which like to me meant a lot from the beginning. It was like, okay, so when I get out there, everybody's gonna have this sort of idea of we're doing something that's dangerous, that's, what I mean, meaningful, all this kind of like values that wasn't presented when I started the job. But when I was at other places, they just sort of threw me on the floor, and the guy was like, "Yeah, this is what we do." But to have that initial layer of, "Hey, no, we're gonna pay you for a week of doing nothing but sitting in front of a computer, watching videos, learning the values that matter to us."
I think this is one of the things a lot of people find intimidating if they've never
Mhm.
like been in any of these places before, being like, are these people all going to be dicks to me? Are they, are they going to bust my balls forever? Like, what was your personal experience like?
There's definitely a healthy mix as far as when you get there. they see you and they almost want to see what the first 2 or 3 weeks is like. And that's like every department. The first one, I started at the laser, and there was a really sweet lady there. So you can kind of gauge right away whether or not somebody has that like social butterfly in them. So, certain people you just hit it and it's like, okay, yeah, this guy's my buddy. We're cool. He's friendly. And then there's other guys who are there, they do their job, they collect the paycheck and they go home. You know what I mean? They're not there to have a conversation. They'll help you if you need it, but for the most part, they've been here for how long. They want to make sure that their day is as easy as possible, and any sort of problems that you can create definitely isn't going to be, fun for them. So you kind of have to gauge it yourself, sort of thing. So I tried, my hardest, seeing the glow from the machine shop, to, do as good as I can, but also try to really, really work hard. Like I was sweating as much as possible. Like I was moving. I really wanted to show them like I cared and I was committed. So the one manager of the department, I think he definitely saw that I was like really, really trying my hardest, and he was like, "Hey, I like this guy." They didn't always take a chance on somebody, but he was like, "I'm gonna make them." You know what I mean? I'll get you in here, kind of thing. And I went through a couple manual machines at first, like simple stuff, like putting that notch in, drilling a hole, uh, using a bandsaw. Nothing crazy yet, but each one of those steps, I think they were like testing me. I kind of proved myself, and I remember eventually they came up to me and they were like, "Hey, Cam, we're gonna put you on a CNC," and I was like, finally, you know what I mean? I seen them machines the whole time. I'm hearing them, and those guys look like they had it made. You know what I mean? Not that I wanted to be on my phone or what I mean, not doing anything, but they were, they were kind of more chill than I was. They had the machine running, and they had all this measurement equipment that looked like scientific. They had a process called gauge maker, and that was like 42 different measurements on a single part. You'd run the face like this one, and then you'd cut different on this end. So there was all kinds of measurements being made, and it was a really good place to sort of teach somebody the fundamentals. And I could just
Was
push the
this
button.
mostly a was this mostly a steel shop, or are you guys doing other metals?
Mainly steel. They have some specialized brass uh, processes that are actually really neat. They would heat up a piece of brass and do that sort of wheel thing, and actually form the metal while it's in the machine. That was really cool. I never got to do that, but I watched it happen and I was really, really interested. But they mainly did like 304 stainless, and some of it, like the one of the coolest things I ever got to participate in. They make a like anti-heat seeking missile or something. And it was like, I mean, I didn't do the machining, but I got to cut the stock, and it was like some, what I mean, they wouldn't even tell me how it was made or what it was made of, but it was some crazy metal that they had. And I was like, all right, camera, cut it to 2.5 inches. The master machinists were doing the stuff that was like really complex. Like I think they made like bells or something that it was like in the shape of a bell, but somehow they were like consumable. Somehow they got used, but they were made for making chips. Like they would have to order a
Mm.
lot of them because this bell that we made got messed up in the process of creating those chips. So, and that was something that was like, you had to know what you were doing, and it was very like you could only make so many a day, and they would kind of, there was like rumors around the shop of how much this part was worth. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm
Yeah.
making the 10,000 part a day. This one of these cost $10,000. I'm like, wow.
You're coming up
But,
from the floor. It's not like you had a year or 2 of training of general purpose engineering and
mhm.
manufacturing knowledge. You're just kinda yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
And that was like the big thing, was usually you didn't end up in the machine shop unless you went to tech school or you had some background with the technical college that was in the area. They wanted experience. Like they very rarely, and that's why I sort of I was like, man, I want to have that. I'd love to get that opportunity, kind of thing. But we like opened the book up, and he taught me what concentricity meant, but then I also, what I mean, I'm looking at the other pages of this book and I don't know what half of that is. So I was like, man, I have some room to do. Like I don't need to just put this on bad man's shoulders. Like I should go home and do some of this learning myself. And I I I bugged the guys in the shop. I was like, hey, who has a textbook that I could borrow?
But have you thought about going to school now that you have some experience? Like, would that help you at all? I mean, it help you in knowledge, but would it help you career-wise?
I've struggled with this, where I've found personally I've gotten a lot of opportunity lately just because of my own hard, like just the drive that I have. I've gotten myself to a certain place, but I definitely feel I really want to go back. As far as I want to know book heavy stuff, the stuff that's not physical. Like I understand a lot of conceptual ideas and like some of the hands-on stuff, but when it comes to the formulas, especially like my math skills, sometimes I really feel not confident compared to some of the guys that I know. You know, they know trigonometry and all this, really complex math like the back of their hand. And for me, that's something I have to like sit down and really like take time with. So I definitely feel like there's room for me to grow there, but I wouldn't say that it's going to give me like a huge career. So I'm still kind of I was accepted into the college nearby, but I haven't actually committed because I'm looking at other job opportunities, and I've been doing extracurricular stuff at home.
I'm a high school dropout, and I was sharp and I was a good reader, so I knew a lot of things. But when I got into my career, uh, it was several years in, maybe a little older than you are now, where I started go. It was some similar things where I'm like, for me, it was always philosophy.
Okay.
Something that had no. I mean, it kind of applied when I was a journalist, but it's like something I didn't have any practical need to know. And it's the kind of thing where people be like, "Why do you go to a 4 year college to learn this shit? It's not ever useful." But then I hit a point in my life where I started realizing like people would refer to things or, like philosophers or like a famous book of modern philosophy or something. I'd be like, I don't know what that is. Like I have no clue. And so that is, the advantage of like a broader education, even if it's within like a trade school or whatever, there's a bunch of theoretical stuff and like just basic scientific principles that I'm sure would be useful to you now. But then the flip side is like you don't know until you go through those programs where
Mhm.
those holes are, and can you educate yourself quickly enough? Like, how long were you there? Like, where did you kind of end up on that?
I actually it moved very fast. Like I only was there a year. It felt like a lot longer, but I actually was only there a year. And with my extracurricular studies, and I eventually got that textbook, and I really hammered that home, kind of trying to learn all those concepts that I could. There was a machine shop or aerospace facility, I guess is a better word for it. Aerospace manufacturer, Lycoming Engines, which is where I work now. And there was this stereotype that everybody that started at PMF, they left because Lycoming pays so much more money. And I knew like, it wasn't just a decision of money. I ended up at that gauge maker, like, that was what I was doing for 8 hours every day, like, it was they called it pigeonholed, so I kinda got pigeonholed at that machine, and they kinda communicated that that wasn't something that they didn't tell me. They were like, "Hey, you're getting this opportunity, but we're expecting you to be this guy, and you're gonna go to this 2nd shift," which was something I wasn't exactly happy about. I wanted that 1st shift job, so there were a few things where I was like, I really appreciate them. Like I give them so much thanks, and like I can't thank them enough as far as they gave me the opportunity that I have. But
Were they pissed though? Were they pissed? Did they feel like? Because I'll tell you this: I guarantee you, they knew you were going to leave at some point, but I don't
mhm,
know if they were like, was a year too not long enough? Like, and it's on them ultimately, right? That's owning a shop, that's having employees. But I'm just
mhm.
curious, what was the vibe when you were like, I got a better opportunity, I got to keep moving.
It was really interesting. So the guy who like initially took me under his wing, and like I was on 2nd shift, so I had two like supervisors that I can like Matt and Dave, like, I mean, if they hear this, I'm so thankful they both took me under their wing, gave me all the answers. I could ask them any question, and they would sit with me for 10 minutes and really hammer a idea home. Jerry, he was the main boss. I think he was just like over it. Like he has so much history with this town, and both of those shops. He's seen this happen so many times. He was just like, "Yep."
I'm 47, so I'm not it's not like I grew up in the age of pensions and people working. A lot of people were already moving around different jobs when I was in there in my early career, but it's a really tough one on every side. It's hard to run a business and know that people it's hard to run a business when you know that you can't make enough money to continually level people up internally in a business, and especially in a lot of manufacturing and blue collar stuff, there's just a ceiling on how long you can do that kind of stuff. But then what you're also dealing with is that reality of in an era where people can be fired at will and laid off and massive things too, you're always sort of optimizing for yourself. And you shouldn't feel bad about that, but in aggregate, it's kind of sucks because
Uh,
I can tell you in my career, I got the most forward motion by jumping around, but that included a couple of dead ends where it was like, oh no, like I went to this thing that looked better, but the job I had before actually was way better. Like I should have stuck around for a few more years before I did it. So I don't have the answer, but like, I think it's a real thing. And it comes up on Tool or Die sometimes in the context of like, if we want people to take these jobs that have a lot of training involved and it takes years to get good and competent and to build up the skills. It's real hard to encourage people to get into a manufacturing job where the culture often is like, I'm not saying it was at PMF, but it's like where you might get furloughed or laid off for months or years at a time. And it's like,
uh.
yeah, but that's happened at lots of other jobs. So anyway, just wanted to say that I get the thought. So what was the job you got hired into, like a machinist job at Lycoming?
Yeah, so I started in the barrel cell department, they called it. They have the heads that they create, like their cylinder kits. So there's a barrel, there's a head, and then all the little pieces and the piston that goes inside of it. That's something that they produce in house, and they're very
Just make airplane engines? Is that like the only type of engine they
yeah,
make, or do
that's
they? Yeah.
just straight airplane engines, yeah. And they have four-cylinder, six-cylinder, and I think they have a eight-cylinder, but that's like very rare that they see those come through. I think the main are like the four and the six. So they have they outsource castings and stuff, but it's a lot of they try to manufacture as much as possible there because that's I mean, they definitely are heavy on, if we can get it done here, that's better. And
And
they've had
how
go
big's
ahead.
that company? I mean, you don't need to know down to the person, but in like, is that like hundreds of people in your factory? Like thousands? Like
I'd say
I don't
more
know the airline industry at
mid
all.
300s. I haven't counted
Okay.
in a while, but like a couple over like 340, I would say.
From one place that was a job shop that had a few different clients to working like in house. What was that for a company that makes its own stuff, manufactures its own stuff? What was that culture shift like?
It was interesting. I mean, as far as that was part of the stigma when I talked to the guys at PMF was, and that's something I feel like they had that, I don't know, that blanket of comfort that this is a mom and pop shop. We know the owner, we know his family, we know everybody very very well. So there is like I could work 8 hours over or something, and I could get an extra day off. Like that kind of thing was not happening anymore. You got your vacation. Everything was defined, which there's definitely positives, and just gonna start, when I talk about them, that everything I say is a statement of opinion and not representative of
Yeah.
the
No, of course.
UAW or the company. But so to start, they gave me like a contract. That is
Yeah.
our collective bargaining agreement, and there is all kinds of information in here. I can go over we
This
have
was your first union job then. You'd never done
yeah,
anything union before. What
never
union
heard
is it?
UAW 787,
So it's a UA. They I didn't know they like.
United
uh,
Aerospace Workers. Yeah.
Oh. I was
Or
thinking
wait,
it was
no,
like a
it's
subgroup of United Auto Worker.
United Aerospace. Okay, United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America. It's what the actual.
Yeah, I mean
So
UAW's huge. It's one of the
yeah, yeah.
biggest. Did it feel like a cultural change too to go from a non-union shop to a union shop? Like what? Like
There's
again, I'm not trying to
definitely
get you in trouble or anything, but like
yeah.
what were the vibes?
So as far as like for the most part, like I would say there's like 80% positives. Like I would almost describe it like if you look at the globe and you look at the politics that we have here in America, I'd say 90% of people are going to be like, yeah, I'd pick democracy first. You might have some weird guys on the outside. They're like, no, I like the oligarchs, or I like, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, but everybody picks democracy, right? And then you have all the laws, and we have a giant government, and everybody has an opinion about the government, but kind of like you said, like who sits down and reads the tax code? You know what I mean? Everybody has opinion about taxes, but who actually understands them? You know what I mean? So I feel like a lot of it is people have an understanding, but it's not like a complete understanding. There's guys who've been there 20 years who really get it and they understand it deeper than you. But I could come in with 1 year and think, hey, I have an opinion about this, but I don't understand how it was created, why it was created, and the problems that might exist if it doesn't, what I mean, if it wasn't there. So definitely, it's my opinion. So there's a lot of things where, I can get into there's so many more positives I think than negatives as being a union member. 99% of that in your benefit. So if you're somebody in my shoes, I don't want to complain because, there's things that I look at and I'm like, hey, this could probably be better. I think we could probably extend the olive branch a little bit, but then you hear about the guys who, had a pension or have been on strike or all the history where it's like when I, as a 25-year-old who's been in the union for 2 years, come out and say, "Hey guys, we need to treat the company better." They're like, "Shut up. No." You know what I mean? Like that is not we don't do that. That's not the case.
Unions exist in tension. Labor exists in tension with ownership or management. And it always will be that way. And it always should be that way if you want uh, progress to happen. Because if you let labor have all the control, or capital have all the control, it wouldn't work out well either. But what's hard, and I think you're approaching it from the right mindset, but it reminds me literally of like the same thing of like when you're joining a new company, it's like shut up for a couple weeks and like, get just take the temperature of a place in an organization like a union, and then even a specific union in a specific industry in a specific shop. It's like it takes a while to kind of understand, and honestly, a large amount of curiosity to go, even if this thing seems antiquated or overcomplicated or just bullshitty, like, can I at least try to figure out why like, how did it start? Because it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that things shouldn't be challenged or things shouldn't evolve. That's the point of those tensions. There's just a lot more kind of ritual and procedure in place to go, this is the time we're all going to talk. And like, here's the moment that we do every month or every quarter or whatever, where it's time to get everybody to do it. It's much more of a, uh, not ultra modern, but unions for a second. Tell me about this last couple of years. Like, what have you learned? What has the ramp up been? What machines are you touching? What are you building?
So I started in that barrel line where we get like a rough measurement, of the raw casting, and we have to make that into a precision part. So that's been a bit of lathes in there. We were doing mainly lathes. I think we have a hone and then a grinder was the three machines that we used to make that part precise. And it was definitely nice to see, you don't sit the same machine every week, but you got to learn like 8 different operations that all have their own nuance. You know what I mean? This one does this thing, this one you got to watch out for that. So it was a bit better than just being stuck on that one machine like before. But the interesting part is, I was required to serve my time in that department. And well, actually, no, let me phrase that better. Because with the union, they have what they call the board, the job board, and they put up jobs every week that based on your pay rate, you can bid on, and it goes by seniority.
What's the good and bad of that? Because it's got to have up and down sides.
The good is, as far as somebody like me, I like to learn more. I want to get some new opportunities, but when you do put a bid in to the higher, more desirable positions, more technical, and the positions that the company's like, hey, we don't want changeover. Like, this is not, you're just bouncing all around. You can bid whenever you want, kind of thing. And that's based on like labor grade. So the higher labor grade positions, when you put a bid in, you get locked in. So they basically say, okay, you're going to be here for 18 months. You can't bid anywhere else, and this is your position. Or you're going to be here for 12 months. This is your position. Or 6 months, or however the hierarchy goes. The interesting part about that is they always allow you to bid on a higher pay grade. So if you want to increase your skill, they can't stop you, which I think is like probably my most positive thing about the union. A, you're not stuck where you are. So if you're uncomfortable, you have that idea in the back of your head. You might be able to, you're still working here, but you have that it makes you feel so much better to say, "Hey, I'm not stuck here forever. I have a opportunity to go elsewhere. I have plenty of choices that I can make so I can get out of this uncomfortable situation because we're human. Sometimes you like your coworkers, sometimes you don't. You know what I mean? So I have that opportunity to either grow or just adjust my work environment to something more comfortable. So that has probably been my most positive thing that I've had to deal with.
Just so people that don't have union experience, like that bumping process had to be brokered by the union too. So it's not
Oh
like
yeah.
the job shop or the company says, hey, production's out of whack. We're over, we're heavy here, but we can catch up. We apportion labor over here. Like I'm sure that was all part of the contract, how it's already
It's
built in on how
it's
that process
defined
was
into the
done.
contract, I believe, but
Yeah,
it's not something, you don't read the tax code, you don't know about it until it happens, kind of thing. So they
yeah,
call you and say, "Hey, you owe us money." But we get into and it was very organized. Like they gave us a heads up. The union, there's representatives from the union that come and talk to you and say, "Hey, sorry to hear this. This is what's going to happen. You're going to show up this day. Be prepared for this, this, and this." And things don't always go exactly to plan. Everybody's always freaked out, and it's a stressful. You're comfortable where you're at, and they're telling you, "Hey, you have to find somewhere else." That's not fun for anybody. So there definitely was some unease there, but we showed up, and you go one by one. The most senior guy goes in first. He picks his position, and then there's somebody else who comes in the room who's more senior than you, and he's not happy because he just got kicked out of his job. So he comes in, and
yeah.
he's like, "I gotta go kick somebody else out of his." And then slowly over time, it gets to you, and then you're the guy that and it's not fun. You go up to this position, you go up to the department, and you're kind of like got your head down. You're not trying to look at anybody, especially not the guy that is younger than you and
Yeah.
is less senior. And then
This bumping process could happen where nobody gets laid off because they just need to move people around, or it can move in a situation where it's like we need to move people around and we got too many people in here, and so in a union shop, the people with the lowest senior, it's kind of last in, first out.
actually, just to give a little more context for us, they opened up positions like janitor positions, which is the lowest position, but you still kept your job. You still kept your seniority. And being in the janitor position, you can bid on anything that comes up on the board. So that then gives them the opportunity to say, "Hey,
That's cool.
we'll be able to create these jobs and they'll have the opportunity to go where we want them to," which is kind of like the
Yeah.
behind the scenes. How are we
So you're
thinking
still
about
on the
this?
team, you're still accruing seniority, but you got to mop. You got to eat shit for a little while, but it's
Yeah.
like but they're still trying to take care of you. Yeah. If you're a person who's maybe really kick ass at their job and could be kick ass at the next job, but are kind of an asshole. I'm only talking of myself here. This is my corporate career experience. It's like, maybe you don't get into that next job because you haven't kissed ass of the bosses for, a couple of years. I've been in situations where I have made a mistake in companies I've started to run and I've screwed up and then have to fire people. And the reality is that sometimes, at least in the way business works in America, that you don't have another choice. It's like I gotta really lean down and try to weather this mistake and fix it, and maybe I can bring people back or whatever. And I'm not making excuses for anybody that doesn't take it seriously. I'd put it that way. But I'm really just saying this to underline, like, that is kind of the crux of a union in general, which is, hey, you can be part of an organization that extends across multiple companies, sometimes multiple industries, and we're all, in theory, here working on things together. And then that also ends up getting into a big counterpoint of what a lot of people, and we don't need to discuss this or debate it because millions of people have for a couple hundred years. That is also one of the risks of having a union business is like if you got to a point where you're like, the only way we can keep this business alive is if we fire two-thirds of our staff and we got to like really slim down. And there's situations where a union will be like, well, you can't because that's not part of the contract. And then like that's where you end up running into, I think a valid but also short-sighted view of unions, which is like, well, they don't let me have the flexibility of my business. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that argument from my side because I'm like, uh, if you're running a business where you're planning on firing people all the time, like maybe you're a dick. So like maybe I don't really care too much about it. But I'm happy that you've been able to come on. I'm happy that you're still going. I want to know more about what you're actually working on at Lycoming, but because we're almost out of time, I actually want to go back, which is what in the world is being a hot tub repairman like day to day? Is it a lot of fiberglass or is it a lot of electronics? Like I'm surprised that people like do the tubs get broken? I would think if you broke a tub, you would just get a new one, but I guess they're expensive.
So there's definitely like fiberglass repair if the tub breaks kind of thing. You have like a sheet. We didn't do that all too much. A lot of it was like plumbing. You'd have to find where the pipe went wrong, and then you got to reinstall a new pipe. And it is not fun as far as there isn't much room to find that. And sometimes they wanted to tuck it into this corner of their house, and that back corner is where the pipe's broken. You got to find a way to get to that back corner and pull that pipe out, fix it, seal it, whatever it is. A lot of it was like a multimeter testing the electronic box. You know, hey, my jets aren't working. What happened? Maybe the jet itself was broken. They had a special tool that I could reach in, pull it out from the front, pull it out from the back, just pop a new one in. That was easy. But there were a couple definitely ups and downs. I think from my perspective, the coolest part of that was just the entire knowledge and then having, like, engineers, like, right there if you needed help, like, "Hey, how do I understand this panel box?"
Now,
What
was this a generic, like, was this one company's repair depot, or were they like, they just are a repair shop and they just go out like
they're
a
an
plumber?
actual manufacturer. They make
Got it. On the East Coast, I'm basically like everybody with a hot tub is a pervert. It's not a fair opinion, but I know you have a couple of like, went over to somebody's hot tub house to fix a hot tub and it was like weird or gross or you were just in a weird situation.
you'd show up to these houses and it was like, "Man, look at this neighborhood, like, this is nice," and there were guys, like, it was nice because like, they were friendly, but, like, I remember the one guy, like, gave us, like, a bottle of wine, and I was like, "That's kinda I don't know," you know what I mean? "Why are you giving your hot tub repair guy the wine?" But there wasn't too much that I saw that I mean,
As
we were
long as he
probably
that you're off the clock and you have a bottle of wine, why don't you slip into the tub? Yeah.
I
It could be
actually
a bottle of wine's a nice tip. I think
I
that's
did a bit of
perfectly fine.
landscaping, and I had my cousins were there with me, and there was one lady that we used to go cut her grass, and I don't know if she had a crush on my cousins or what, but she wouldn't let us get much mowing done. She was like, "Come back here, have some of this, take a shot." I'm like, "Guys, we're supposed to be working," and he's like there, managing the customer kind of thing. But it was a good time.
You're probably in a better place, but yeah, that's just a bored housewife thing. I live in the county north of New York City. I live in Westchester, and I actually love it. And there's a lot of we live on the riverside, so there's like a lot more. I don't know, it's more normal. And but yeah, I'm always like I've got a friend. Actually, the richest guy in my neighborhood is a plumber, so I like talk to him or plumber, but mostly does HVAC stuff too. And yeah, I love those kind of stories of just like it's like just what weird stuff when you get invited into somebody's house. Like, what do you expect to see? But anyway, I'll ask you that off the podcast where you can give me the real dirt. But I've really enjoyed having you on. I think your attitude is the right one, man. Like, even just reaching out to us and just being like, "Hey, I'm enthusiastic about it. I'm learning. I'm feeling good." I love your story in part because it's like, uh, you just kind of, and I don't mean this as an insult or anything, but you kind of fell into it, and when you got the opportunity, you're like, "Whoa, I this is really intellectually challenging and fun and cool." And sometimes you got to spend a few years grinding through that stuff to get to another place. And sometimes, in all honesty, for some people, that's all that they'll ever do because that's all that where they're at. But that there is, if you've got a good attitude and you've got some curiosity, that like there's a lot of things to learn. It
Mhm.
doesn't just stop.
I actually I just real quick, as far as, like, the analogy that I like to use whenever I think about, where this has taken me and how much it's given me, like, I felt like they say, you put a flea in a jar and you put the lid on it, he's never gonna jump higher than that jar. Well, if you're a machinist and they put the lid on your jar, there's a lot of room to jump. Like, there is so much higher that you can reach, and I don't know, I don't wanna speak too quickly, but I've been, quote, unquote, "developing an app in my free time," but I've also been connecting with other people in the atmosphere, and just being able to communicate effectively, manufacturing, and all of this has given me a lot of opportunity, so I don't know if I'm gonna be there for another 2 or 3 years. I'm kinda looking around for, whatever else I can grab.
If you are doing something that a lot of people of your generation don't know about, just to be like, open and talk about it. Your generation is all just like talks a lot more and communicates a lot more, is a lot more open and chill about stuff. So you're doing it right. I'm not going to be mad at you if in 3 years you're like, I am now a tech titan that has a wonderful app business that's doing it. But if you keep the attitude of curiosity, I think like and keep your like positive attitude, I think you're going to be great. So, and yeah, and that's where I'm going to end it. But otherwise,
Awesome,
I'm just
man.
going to keep praising you. Thanks for
Yeah, no,
coming on. This has been
I
fun.
really appreciate it. If anybody's interested in talking about manufacturing, I'm here. Yeah,
Oh,
I'd
yeah,
love
what's
for
your
people to
tell
reach out.
people your, Twitter account or, like, how to get a hold of you?
Cameron underscore shots. If you look up Cameron shots, you should find me.
Schatz.
Yeah,
So awesome, man. I will talk to you soon.
awesome. Thank you.